Buenos días, les damos la bienvenida a todos los asistentes que nos acompañan el día de hoy de manera presencial aquí en Conferencias y a los que nos acompañan en nuestra transmisión vía streaming a través de nuestra página web www.col40.co. Good morning, welcome to all attendees to Colombia 4.0, the event where we dream digital and make it real. You will find the best speakers in the digital creative industry in one place and free. This event, organized by the Ministry of Technologies, Information and Communication, revealing the experience of people who have made their ideas of the digital world become a reality and could transform their lives and also their environment. Let's live the world of innovation and technology that make us bigger and better. Today, we will have now a conversatory, Globalization in Music as a Result of Technology. So we invite Jorge Bedoya, lawyer graduated from Los Andes University, and he is member of the VGBA, Video Game Bar Association. Also, we invite Ryan Kavanagh, better known as Slow Hands, is a video jockey producer from New York. So welcome to Colombia 4.0, and please go ahead with the conversatory Globalization in Music as a Result of Technology.
All right. Ready to go?
Ok, buenas tardes a todos. Obviamente este panel va a ser en inglés, pero que igualmente quería aprovechar para saludarlos en español. Estamos aquí con Ryan Kavanagh, que nos va a estar acompañando, y bueno, cualquier cosa tenemos preguntas al final y vamos a estar hablando. So Ryan, welcome. Finally.
Thank you for having me. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
You don't like to use your big boy voice?
You'd figure I'd be better at this, doing it for a living.
All right, this is awesome. So thank you so much for coming to Colombia and for sharing part of your experience and knowledge. It's definitely something that we're all seeking to hear. And it's been a while. We've been talking for the past 3 days about music and technology.
Yeah.
And I believe it's a subject that we can definitely talk about a lot. We can
Yeah,
talk
we have
like
already.
for days.
Yeah,
We have.
for 2 days. Yeah.
We have. So well, before we start, let me just do a brief intro. So my name is Jorge Bedoya. I'm a partner at I Law Bedoya Bisbal. We're a law firm located in Barranquilla and Los Angeles, and we work a lot with tech and entertainment when it comes to music, video games, animation. We're there for that. Now that I finish with this, let's start with the first question, shall we?
Sure.
All right. Okay. So you have been around on the music industry for maybe more than 20 years, right?
Yeah, so I went to music school in 2000, which was an interesting time to decide to go into music, mostly because I went for guitar, for jazz and classical guitar, and had a bit of I don't know if you've seen the movie Whiplash, but had a bit of an experience like that where my guitar teacher was Buddy Rich's guitar player when he was 15, so he was a bit of a stickler for practice. And I went there to be a session player essentially. And in the time that I was in school, I'm a dropout, by the way. The 1 year that I was in school, the music industry completely revolutionized, going from professional studios to being able to have a bedroom studio. So it was a big shift in the industry, and then I became enamored with DJing, as it seemed like a simpler form of performance. So I left school and moved to New York City from Philadelphia to be a DJ at 19 years old. And it was, in that time, all of my friends who went to music school, while some of them are massively successful right now, the dude that does the Grammy band and all that stuff, Adam Blackstone, was in my class, and he's obviously a successful musician. Kanye West, guitar player, also went to my school. Some of those guys did really well, but a lot of my friends came out of college and just didn't even know how to exist in an industry that they'd gone to school for, because it had changed over the 4 years that they had been in school.
So let me ask you a quick question when it comes to that. Like, taking into account your experience, when was the first time that you realized that tech was going to be like a sidekick forever, on your music career, and that it was going to be there with you and for you,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's several. I'd say there's several experiences. Some pinnacle moments where I began working for the New York Times, doing music for them when they went digital. When they were doing digital video, and got to work with some fantastic directors. One of them is Matt Wolf, who did a really fantastic documentary on Arthur Russell that got a lot of attention. And so our whole means of communication at that time was via instant messenger, sort of things like that. But also just, at that point, file compression was getting to a point that you could send full sessions back and forth. You were getting video digitally. Even prior to that, obviously, 2005, 2006, that was a big one. Another big one was being cornered by Nicholas Jarre in my apartment while we were doing an event there, and him telling me about Facebook for the first time, and realizing that social media was going to be an imperative part of music, which is odd because I don't really use it now. And then the next time was when I began touring internationally. The first year as a DJ, before I went back to live performance, I was touring with vinyl. And I was spending thousands of dollars losing money having airports destroy records, and that was when the CDJs were like really coming into prominence and taking over the turntable, and you were able to just carry around a flash drive and a pair of headphones. So that was a big shift.
Like, do you recall that time where, people started using other platforms such as MySpace?
MySpace was, I think I had like 18 MySpace pages where I did different kinds of music. But yeah, it was trying to think. The first record label that I worked with was Mood Gadget, which was a sub-label of Ghostly International, and I think they discovered me through one of my many MySpace pages. So yeah, that was huge. And then Facebook was massive, and then obviously Instagram, and it shifts over now TikTok. So it's wild, it's really wild.
I just think it's kind of crazy if you think about it. I mean, how tech did globalize music a lot, especially when you think about like three things. You before you were mentioning how you were going to be able to send music sessions over to other people to work on them. So that means, well, maybe not setting aside a studio, but providing people with the, with the proper software to record their own music. And at the same time, you have these platforms where you don't really have labels, but you're able to either share your music by sending files, such as Napster and LimeWire back in the early 2000s, and of course, MySpace having that whole new thing of social media and interacting with people.
We're sounding like old men right now talking about MySpace and Napster, but yeah, it's a crazy, just the idea of being able to share information so quickly and music so quickly, that music is always kind of, in my opinion, and it could be a little subjective, has always been at the forefront of technology because it was the smallest file format. So when LimeWire came out, the music industry immediately had to shift and change because it was being stolen. So they needed to figure out a way to monetize music in a different way than through the internet. And as we came up with Spotify and all the other things that we have now. But so and I see that happening now a bit more where we're learning. I work a lot with DistroKid, who's a company out of New York I'm sure a lot of people know about, that they help you distribute your music to all platforms. And I have a family relation that works with them, and most of their workforce is dedicated to stopping fraud. So they come up with new ways of distributing and promoting music for artists, and almost instantaneously the day it comes out, they've got more cases of fraud, and they have to go through and figure out new ways to find the fraud so that people can still monetize their music or aren't creating bots that are generating AI music, which is just grabbing free samples and stacking them on top of each other, creating a 30-second sound sample and then uploading it through DistroKid to Spotify, and then having a bot that then plays that and generates plays, and then people in Indonesia are making tons of money off of essentially doing nothing. It's AI. It's wild to see where that's come, how far that's come.
Do you still program when it comes to creating your music?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what I'm doing. I think it's the things that have shifted as a result of technology for me is the biggest thing would be how I perform live now, which is entirely improvised. So it's a little disappointing to anybody that wants to come out and hear a record that I've recorded and is on Spotify, because everything's sort of made instantaneously. And that's a complete result of technology. A lot of it is sort of generative. So you have applications on the iPad that you can select keys, scales, and then through that, it's almost like you can create a band that plays behind you, and I can kind of react to the computer, which is pretty wild. It has had a huge effect on how I do everything. And the programming, my DJing has always been a bit OCD. When I DJ, I'm always make sure everything works, is in key, I re-edit it, I do all that stuff before I go and play. So I dedicate a solid few days before every DJ gig to do that, which is a little over the top, but that's just who I am, I guess. So
That's great.
programming is essential, yeah.
So, taking into account that when we talk about tech and globalization, those are like probably one of the broadest things we can ever think. You can think about. Taking into account the fact that you can share your music so quickly. We just saw in Sebastian and Paula's talk before, they were talking about mentioning sharing your music right away, not overthinking. Do you think that faculty that you're going to be able, to share your music so quickly has affected the way in which you write and produce your own music?
It's sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about how quickly technology has allowed for music to come about, but also just, I was talking with Sebastian the other day about this band Polyphia, and I was saying the crazy thing about how much information that we can get and how quickly we can upload music and how quickly things can get plays, YouTube plays, this is that, and the successes of these things, it's wild, and I think, yeah, it's imperative, and it's daunting. It's hard to digest as much stuff since stuff comes out so quickly. And it's certainly affected how my interest level in creating music or promoting my music. Somebody who used to release music only on vinyl to now go to, in a matter of days, I can write a song and have it up on Spotify. Yeah, it has to change how you write, how you produce, and it can be immediately rewarding through a social media thing where you're getting lots of likes and lots of plays, or it can be immediately defeating where you're just like, nobody cares about this, and you see you've got like less than 100 plays on Spotify. So it's up and down, I think it's how you manage and how you work around that. You need to use technology to promote that stuff, the social media things, and get those out there, and yeah, it can be really, really rewarding.
Do you also think, because over that perspective, you're talking about maybe sharing with, your consumers, your listeners. Mm-hmm. But do you think that it also has helped to build a community around using certain tools? For example, it's like, okay, I'm working maybe with Fruity Loops, or I'm working with, these other programs that you have, Pro Tools or Logic, or. Yeah,
strangely, I don't think that the application that you're using creates so much of a community, but the internet's created a community. I mean, it's wild to me that as a result of the internet, I can go play in Japan, or I can play. I'm not like a massive artist. I'm not J Balvin. I'm not Maluma. I'm not selling out stadiums. But I can go and play a show in Indonesia, or in China, or in Tunisia, and people know about me because of, at the time, Facebook, but then Instagram, and now Spotify has become a new source of. To me, Spotify is social media essentially. It's likes in the form of plays. So.
And maybe falling back a little bit in what we were discussing before, do you think that it's harder to commit for music writers and producers to a certain style, knowing the immediate feedback they're getting from people once they release their music? Because I think it's kind of tough when you're working on a certain style, and all of a sudden you get feedback. It's like, well, so we're listening to this type of music. We're basically focused on this niche. Do you think commitment is kind of an issue with globalization, with music's globalization?
Do I think, say that one more time? Do I think what?
Do you think commitment to to what you're working for, what you're working on? Sorry, like the style you're working on, or maybe the way you're writing or producing your music?
It helps. There's somebody mentioned before. I think we were talking about the idea of reggaeton, and I don't want to say the production value being subpar, or maybe the quality not being as high as we want. I don't think that that's the case so much. I think that the problem with commitment is that we might be almost overcommitted in a short span of time. So kids have access to these applications for free that they rip, say Fruity Loops or whatever else, and then they immediately start trying to copy things. And so I think the turnaround time for genres and their success and their popularity is really fast now. You have trap music in in the States that's huge. And it's at the point now, in my personal opinion, where it's become really boring because music that I love, it's just because there's thousands of kids making it, and the quality control has gone down immensely. So where you had what's his name, Zaytoven, and all the Atlanta guys who invented this stuff. It's now you have kids making 100,000 trap songs a day with mumble auto-tuned rap, like kids who aren't really successful rappers or don't know how to write. So yeah, you need to be careful with that. I think as we go into the future, we're gonna have to have some sort of filter or some sort of understanding and quality control over what happens. Because that's the problem with so much technology, so much stuff, so much information being fed to us, is that the quality control is very low. And DistroKid and companies like that, I mean, anybody in this room could go into their hotel right now, record anything, and have it up on Spotify in 3 hours. So yeah, it's with that, it's gonna take, that's something we're gonna have to learn,
And I actually believe it's kind of tough if you think about it, that the fact that you get feedback so quickly,
Yeah.
So if you're gonna be looking to the KPIs on how that song is doing, after a week you're gonna be like, this song is dead, it's not producing what I thought. Let's just move to the next thing, right?
But I will say on feedback, I mean, feedback is an interesting thing, or at least the acceptance, because I don't know how much of it actually. I think this is a weird shift, but I think the best album of my lifetime at almost 40 is Yeezus by Kanye West, and I think it's the best album ever because it was really the first time that he sourced incredibly young producers that weren't well known. So Avian Christ, Arca, is it Gesaffelstein, the French DJ. And it created this sound that then became popular. And at the time, Arca was nobody. I mean, he was a local kid DJ from Venezuela in New York City, playing a really popular, famous gay party, doing sort of avant-garde stuff, and he was making these unbelievable mixtapes. And I don't even think they were that revered at the time. I mean, the one that I think they hired him based off of was like under a couple thousand plays, and now it's at millions of plays, and he's one of the most revered producers in the country, in the world. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna become the responsibility of artists on a higher level, the J Balvins of the world, the Diplos of the world, the Kanye West of the world, to really play an A&R role and be that filter, and expose people to these things when there's that much information coming at them, to really refine that and tell them what could potentially be good and bad.
I don't want to step aside from the subject, but do you think that if you step under a brand, let's say somebody like some of these big acts, start working with you, do you think that kind of solves, a problem with music? I mean, with musicians and artists?
Does it solve a problem with musicians?
No,
sorry, I keep repeating the questions. I don't know if it, yeah, I think it does. I mean, you need a stamp of approval, and there's always been there's been a lineage or like a music or any career path, you need to go in and intern and understand what's happening in those situations. So I think we've expedited the process of becoming successful. You can be Arca or Avian Christ, where you have nobody knows who you are, and then the next day you're massive and in demand. And I think that, yeah, it's a heavy responsibility of the people like the bigger artists in this world.
If you got to step back and kind of draw some sort of a comparison between what was done before with the technology available, at the time, let's say, before we were talking about Pet Sounds from the Beach Boys, and how they used whatever they had in their hands, and you also mentioned Revolver by the Beatles.
Yeah.
And now you just mentioned Jesus from Kanye West.
Yeah, and then another ridiculous album is Damon Albarn, the Gorillaz album, that he wrote the entire thing on the iPad in like 2009 or 10 or something. I can't remember whatever year the iPad came out. I mean, that's insane. It's insane that you can do so much with so little, and as iPads become more and more prevalent. I mean, I've used the iPad since day one, and some of the first apps on the iPad was the ability to control your computer and or create music in certain ways. I think Korg put out the Electribe on the iPad within the first couple weeks. So yeah, it's technology and music just run hand in hand. You need one serves the other. So I think, yeah.
And I was going to ask you another question related to that. Do you think that tech is going to come to a point where talent is not even going to be needed? Because, I mean, I have a lot of respect for a lot of producers and writers, but it's just the fact that there are so many tools available and you can build so many things.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm sure anybody who's here has heard the AI recreation of Nirvana as they would sound now, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's scary that we can create music without a single human. At the same time, I question whether AI or tech can step in for originality and newer ideas. I don't think with something like Nirvana or creating things that are in the past, they need an algorithm that registers and reads what's happened before. But they can't, I guess you could do generative stuff where potentially you could just kind of throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks, but I think humans are always going to have to control the technology. I don't think it'll ever fully replace that. I hope not anyway, God.
Are you scared?
I'm scared a little bit, but it's also, it's super important to evolve. And so I've actually gotten horribly into coding. It's about as good as my Spanish. But now I can sit down and if I have an idea or if I want to create a plugin or if I want to create an instrument, I can just start coding or go to my friends that I know at Apple and ask them to do it. And you can make what you want. Everything's customizable. And I see that as the future of every single art, really. That instead of kids sitting down and figuring out how to make a trap hi-hat rhythm in Fruity Loops, they're going to be kind of drag and dropping code and creating their own ways of making music. And so when we interview people in the future, I don't think it's going to be so much about what DAW do you use? Do you use Logic? Do you use Pro Tools? Do you use this? It's going to be about how did you make the software that made this music, because nothing else sounds like this. And that to me is super exciting. When you think about what people like Arca have done, making sounds that are just so unbelievable and sound like they're from the future, and then syncing that with Jesse Conda, who's doing the video stuff for him. I mean, yeah, the sky's the limit when it comes to coding. Who knows what kind of stuff kids will come up with these softwares.
Great. So we already went past the whole, we already mentioned how globalization and communications has made music from basically any part of the world, available to the market and to people and to listeners, of course. What do you think has been Colombians' role on music's globalization through tech?
It's funny, we talked about this question before you asked, and I was thinking about, I've been coming to Colombia for over 10 years, and it's kind of my home away from home. And I remember the first time that I went to Medellin, they took me to a club, and they were apologizing, because they were like, they're going to play reggaeton, it's terrible. And now it's this world-dominant music. Another experience I had there in seeing how important Colombia has been was I played at La Solar, which is a festival in Medellin, and I was backstage hanging out with this kind of reggaeton guy. He had like all the essentials, the satchel pack and the weird Adidas pants, and we were just kind of talking, and he was telling me about how he was traveling through, and I went to my friend, and they were like, oh, it's just this, he's a cool act, he's this, he's that, he's like a trap Latin artist, or trap Spanish artist, and it was C. Tangana who I was hanging out with, and I think he came to Colombia for like 3 months, and then his most recent album that came out, a year or two ago, is, I think, the most fulfilling album I've ever heard. It incorporates Spanish flamenco with reggaeton, with cumbia music, so I think that I don't know if I'd call it Spanish-speaking music, but Latin and Spanish music is so unbelievably important, and it's the most global music right now. I mean, it's crazy. It's like South Koreans want to see J Balvin can fill stadiums anywhere in the world, and that's unbelievable, and that's a product of Colombia. So you have that, you have, influence over Tangana. Everybody's coming here to produce and to write, and it's awesome. I think that's only going to get better in time.
Do do you think it's maybe that we can blame it on the talent, the fact that despite of the lack of infrastructure when it comes to the, to music infrastructure, maybe big studios, big producers, the fact that, Colombia has had like notable talent, that's what we're having right now, the fact that we, get all of this Colombian music and Medellin being, kind of named the urban music, well, or the reggaeton capital of the world.
Yeah,
basically.
I mean, it's an interesting thing to me. In my time in Colombia, one of the things that you guys have been really good at, and it's not a judgment, I think it's awesome, but you're really good at taking people's music, other styles of music from around the world and making them your own, like salsa in Cali. I mean, salsa was invented by Puerto Ricans in the Bronx, and then Colombians found it, and then Cali became the epicenter of recording salsa, and that became the identity of that city in a way, at least from my understanding, what I've been told. I could be wrong. But I think it's also, I mean, reggaeton was Puerto Rican, and now it's synonymous with Medellin and Colombia. And yeah, I think that's amazing. I mean, there's so many great young producers when I'm anywhere in this country, it's just music all the time. And the other thing that's so fascinating about Colombia and its role in global music is that I don't know if there's a country in the world that has the multitude of genres in such a small amount of space. You've got, Bomba Stereo from the Pacific, you've got the Medellin crew, you've got totally different like kind of rock stuff here in Bogotá. And yeah, it's awesome, man. I mean, I think Colombia is at the forefront of music production as a whole and creation right now, more than anywhere else.
Oh, thank you. So many good compliments about my country. I like it.
My pleasure.
All right. So let's go with the last question, and then we're gonna, so we can wrap it up a little bit and just go to people's questions. Where are we heading?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we talked a little bit about that with the idea of programming and coding your own stuff as a form of fine art creation, if you will, musical creation. I think that with the Raul Alejandros, the Rosalias, the C. Tanganas, the J Balvins of the world, the Bad Bunnies, I think there's going to be more and more Latin and Spanish music. It's going to keep going and just overtake the world. And as far as the tech goes on that, it's hard to say, aside from, I would say, the programming, and you're just going to find more and more young producers doing more and more crazy stuff that is inexplicable,
Do you think that live music will be eventually replaced by,
God, I really
technology?
hope. I mean, as somebody who's been a DJ for 20 years and has a classical music background, it's a hard. There's not a connection with a CDJ like there is with a guitar or with music coming out of your body through air and vibrations. I don't think any amount of technology is going to overtake the caveman-esque methodology of just making music with other people, of experiencing that, of you creating something out of thin air, and that's never going to be fulfilled by hitting a play button.
It's just we sort of had an experience with the whole pandemic. People started throwing virtual concerts, which of course you can find any live session from any artist on YouTube probably. But it kind of gave us the whole experience of not experiencing live music for a while due to the pandemic. And we got to experience these other things like Travis Scott on Fortnite, for example, which was quite an experience.
Yeah, that's a whole other. That's literally a whole other world of doing performance through that stuff. It's funny. I was talking to Sebastian a couple of days ago about one of the crazes on YouTube. I don't know. I'm sure everybody has their own YouTube universe that they go in, but a lot of it now is with live music is a lot of guys going in and trying to analyze whether something was created live or created digitally, and that sort of crossover. What's wild about that is when you hear something that you just think is completely impossible for a human to execute, say on a guitar or piano, and then they show a 15-year-old kid just shredding an instrument, and you're like, so I think technology and the future work hand in hand with the more analog things, and as kids get better and better, faster and faster because of YouTube and because of technology, and can execute things that we never thought was possible before physically, yeah, it's going to be a wild ride down the road.
I'm not gonna get into the metaverse conversation because I believe everybody's already, had a lot of it during, the past 3 days.
Yeah.
But once again, like, do you think you're gonna be able maybe to perform remotely? I mean, is that gonna become something, a trend for people to, maybe provide your services or your gigs as a DJ? Are you going to be able to do that on a regular basis, or do you think that you don't want to miss the whole aspect of live music and connecting with people and a live audience?
Well, I think my biggest theory just about the idea of the immediate music distribution through things like DistroKid and through YouTube and it's music, because it's so easy to get music on Spotify and anybody can do it now versus back when Universal Records or Warner Brothers used to sign artists. I think it's going to be about a combination. Music is going to become a combination of content, ideas, and the actual music itself. So you're not going to, the idea of the traditional album is going to become almost antiquated and boring. You're not going to want to go listen to a Travis Scott record on Spotify. You're going to want to go to his TikTok or his Instagram or whatever comes out in the future and see how it's just have sort of an experience, almost whether it's a virtual reality experience with it. You're going to have to do something a lot more than just playing music for it to be successful. And video games. There's so many different outlets and there's so many different ways, and then the way that AI can factor into that, and the way that generative stuff can factor into that. It's going to be intense, but it's going to be a really cool thing to see.
Do you think that we're going to step back into an analog distribution system, like perhaps like we've seen how vinyl has made a
didn't they just I think they just like a couple weeks ago reinstated it as a factor in the Billboard charts because vinyl sales are so high right now. There is that. There's always going to be that. I mean, they say 19-year-olds don't care about social media anymore, and they're like out learning how to start fires and stuff. So we'll see what happens.
And before we finish, so a couple of days ago, Bad Bunny just released his album, which was like 23 tracks. I believe he didn't go out with any singles. He just went like with the whole album.
Yeah.
Do you think that we're gonna maybe go back to that system where people just release an album without releasing a single because of the overflow of music and of offer that we have right now?
I know Bad Bunny is insanely amazing. I think we need to start, my personal opinion, I'm getting kind of sick of going onto Spotify and seeing an artist put out a new record and it's an hour and a half long. Whether that's Beach House or Bad Bunny, or I think rather than putting out albums all the time or even singles, we should learn how to refine an album back to like the 40 minute 8-track format, and it's quality controlled instead of putting out everything you've worked on for the last 6 to 8 months.
Awesome. So taking into account everything we have mentioned before, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, a lot of ground here.
Is there any specific advice you would like to give to people, who are currently on the music industry or thinking about a path, in the music industry?
Advice. Just do something unique. I mean, you can
think about a new artist who's thinking about putting their music. Maybe they don't know if they should be releasing. They don't know if they should be working with a producer. They don't know if I think collaboration is imperative. It's unhealthy for us to sit around and think that we can make music by ourselves in a room, and I'm sure Sebastian would say the same thing. I mean, we spend so much time as recording artists by ourselves, so I think it's important to have some sort of social interaction and learn from each other. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, so now we're going to step up, to the questions from the audience that we have. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there are any.
Ok, ¿alguien tiene preguntas que quiera hacer? ¿Nadie? No, mentira. Ahí está. Allá.
Hello.
Hi.
So I have a question. So what do you think about all these musicians who says that the people who make music just in laptops, like we make it like right now with Logic, even GarageBand, as you say, on the iPad, all these musicians are saying that these people is like they are not musicians. It's like if you don't play the guitar or make a record in the traditional way with a piano, a band, you are not a musician. And I think that is not right?
I think, what do I think? I think you benefit from learning an instrument, but you also learn a lot through, Logic, I know Logic inside and out. I've used it for 20 years. It's an instrument to me. So it's as important, if not more important than my guitar and my voice or whatever it is that I'm doing. Like I said, a lot of my YouTube rabbit holes become watching teenagers recreate pop records like in minutes. And the fact that a kid, I spent all day yesterday learning how to make a synth sound from like a record from a 15-year-old on YouTube. So yeah, I don't think that kid can play a piano like Keith Jarrett or Bill Evans, but that's not really a necessity now, you know? If you're a musician, I mean, the last time I think I saw a piano player play live was in the Rome airport. So it's more important to do that. It's just a matter of doing it with a bit of originality. I think you need to learn by mimicking people, by copying other artists, by copying other producers and making beats. But at some point, it can be tough, and this can go both ways, but it can be tough to create on your own when your knowledge is limited of the subject that you're doing. So it would be hard to write a novel if you don't know how to write a sentence, you know? So it's not impossible, but it's going to be a lot harder.
Ok, otra pregunta acá.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Felipe Barajas.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Sorry.
How you guys?
I'm from my own business called Abstract Dream,
Okay.
and I wanted to know if you are interested in work in networking with some Latin artists or contacts here.
Yeah, I have been. I actually, up until a few months ago, had moved to Medellin
Really?
to do work here, just because I've lived in New York for 20 years,
Yes.
and everybody in New York is moving to Medellin right now. Like Run the Jewels just moved there. All the producers I know. There's one of my really, really good friends is a guy named Teddy Stewart who runs a company called Samples from Mars, which does high-end samples. And he just sent me like a laundry list of all the producers that have moved to Medellin, and it's everybody's coming here to record. So yeah, that's my future right now, is to stay here.
Oh, okay. Maybe I could share my brand to you.
Yeah, please. Yeah. We can talk afterwards for sure.
And
Yeah.
actually, I'm living in Medellin right
Oh,
now.
awesome. It's a good weather.
Yeah, okay. We talk later then?
What's up?
We talk later
Yes,
then?
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Let's all move to Medellin.
City of Eternal Spring.
Hi. A few minutes ago, you were talking about how the IA and all these all these tools to make music production are changing the way, and so he also said it, how people, start criticizing all of these producers because they think, they make everything just like automatically by, using those apps, and, the talent is going into a second plane. So looking at the good side of it, do you think that having these tools, we can see these producers making like everything by their own, like producing, writing, and performing, such as we saw in the 20th century, like people like James Brown or David Bowie or even Prince, who made everything by themselves. And so being able to do that, and also being able to compete by themselves against the huge influence that discographics have in the music business and in the music industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's as an approaching old man who's been in the music industry for 2 decades, the kids that are being judged for doing these things are being judged by people who are unwilling to accept the fact that things are going to change. If you look at the evolution of things, like Mike Dean, for instance, who produces everybody under the sun. I mean, he's in his late 50s, pushing 60, and he's still working. He wrote all of Travis Scott's music. I mean, he's at the forefront of everything because of his ideas with technology, because of working with young kids. I would say my only real judgment of young producers who don't know music theory or traditional formats of music is falling down the rabbit hole of drag and drop from Splice, where you're pulling in full recreated songs. I mean, what was the, it wasn't Hotline Bling, I'm trying to think of which song it was. There was a Young Thug song and a Travis Scott song. In the same year, one sample from Splice was used on 8 #1 singles. The same sound, the same 8-bar loop. And I think that's a frightening place to be when the best music in the, or what's the most popular music in the world is the same music. So I think kids just need to learn from that. I mean, if you can drag and drop, but learn how to do your own stuff. And what, as far as the filtration, who's going to make it and who's not, it's going to come down to who does it the most originally and who has a business mind to understand what people want and what people might want in the future. And I think that's going to be, I think that's eventually what's going to take over universities for music, the idea of business, of prediction of what's going to happen. It's going to become more of like, almost like being an economist. You're trying to see what's coming rather than, you know, working based on what's happened already. So, hope that answered your question.
Yeah, so I have 2 quick questions.
Yeah, shoot.
Oh. So my name is Jose Ivan,
Nice to meet you.
and nice to meet you too. I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
The first, how do you see music in 50 years? Because with these digital devices, new instruments, samples, beats, it's becoming something really boring. So can we go back to the real instruments? And the other question is, do you think mashups will be trends? Because
Do you think mashups are what?
yes, mashup, because you see, for example, a artist making remix, and
That maintaining and being popular. I mean, the mashup is a funny concept because it's been around since I can. I mean, I used to watch Steve Aoki playing dive bars in New York City in the early 2000s to like 5 people, and he was playing mashups. So they've been around for a while. I think it's going to be harder to do mashups because companies like DistroKid are so perseverant about copyright infringement, and they have hundreds of people trying to protect that. So, and I don't think that there's not so much blog music anymore. Blogs are kind of a thing of the past. So you don't really have that method to deliver. I mean, maybe blogs are still popular, but I haven't heard a 15 or 19-year-old kid talk about them. And that's kind of where mashups really became popular, was the idea of just doing it, putting it up on your blog. And, you know, I mean, Diplo made his whole career off that, you know, in the beginning when he was in Philadelphia. So yeah, that's important. And I think with the generative, you asked where I see things going in 50 years, I think it's going to become more generative. I think that one of the things that, like, an example of where I see things going is I work with a lot of hip hop artists, like up and coming hip hop kids in New York. And many of them are not skilled in music theory or things like that. And so I've taken a lot of, here's probably the most techie thing I'll say about this. They would have ideas in their head, but they'd be too intimidated to execute or sing them for you. So I learned how to take auto-tune and translate it into MIDI so that they could sing what was in their head. And I see that becoming a thing. Like, I think at some point we're going to get to a point that we can sit down and go to our phone, not knowing anything about music, and just talk or sing into it, and it's going to create exactly what's in your head. And that's kind of scary, honestly.
Okay, so thank you so much,
Thank you,
Ryan,
guys.
for everything. And I want to also thank the Ministry of ICT for providing this amazing space on a yearly basis. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you for
visiting
having me,
Sturgeon.
guys. Yeah,
Let's
I
give a
appreciate
round of applause to Ryan Kavanagh, DJ Slow Hands.